There we go. All
Okay.
right. Okay. Yep. We're recording and we're all set. All right. I'm speaking with Brett Warner this morning. Brett is a candidate for Lucas County Sheriff, one of three on the ballot on November 3rd. He's the only one who's actually in the Sheriff's Department right now. So we're going to get his thoughts on defunding and refunding, mental health of law enforcement officers, and the rest. Brett, thanks a lot for the time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
So let's start with how you got into law enforcement. When I talked to Mike Navarre last week, it was because he had family members, including his dad, who had been police officers, not sheriff's deputies. How did you decide, and when did you decide to get into law enforcement?
It was a specific instant actually. It was my senior year of high school. I was at an event where things were getting a little bit out of control, dangerous even, and local law enforcement were called to the event. The first officer or two that showed up were separating the individuals and everybody that was involved, and the third and fourth ones that showed up became the calm, the reason, the people who were there to help.
Yeah.
Instantly, I know I did. I'm assuming that everybody else who was around felt safer. The situation was being taken care of. People were no longer in danger. And I think it was at that moment I knew that law enforcement was the direction I wanted to go. I wanted to be that person who was the calming voice. I wanted to be that person to help others.
That's a good impression to have from law enforcement. Not everybody is lucky enough to get that first impression. A lot of people don't have that good first instance when it comes to law enforcement. But being a sheriff, I'm sure you've seen some of that too. So, how long ago was that, and what kind of training did you go through at the time? And did you go right into the sheriff's department, or were you in a police force before this?
Well, that was in ancient times, Fred. That was my senior year of high school. It was 1985.
Ah, that's nothing. I graduated in '69. You're a baby.
But going right directly into law enforcement really wasn't an option at that time at 18 years old.
Mhm.
Fortunately for me, I had somebody encourage me to look into the military, serving my country. And so I left after high school for the United States Air Force. I went active duty Air Force immediately. After my initial time in the Air Force, my first 4 years, I transferred to the reserves and to the Air National Guard. And while I was at the Air National Guard, actually at the 180th, is when I then finally received the opportunity to go to the police academy and start my law enforcement career.
Did you start your law enforcement career with the sheriff's department, or did you
Um,
serve someplace else for a while?
Actually, I worked for 10 years. I worked for a small agency called Waterville Township. I live
Oh,
in
yeah.
Waterville Township currently. So my first 10 years was there. Actually, I never intended on leaving Waterville Township back then. That was kind of where I figured I would always be. I enjoyed it there. But after 9/11, being gone for 2 years, you come back home, priorities change, your life changes. They always say, they're going to debrief you when it's time to leave, because when you
Yeah.
go back to your civilian life, things are going to change. And you don't believe that until you get back to your civilian life and see that things have changed. So opportunities presented themselves, and I got a great opportunity to come work for the sheriff's office. And 18 years later, I'm really, really happy that I got that
Now,
opportunity.
so Waterville, I would expect, was kind of quiet. What's the difference between your experience there, Waterville Township, when you started, and your experience as a sheriff's deputy?
Well, kind of quiet is an interesting. I think one of the big differences between now and then with Waterville Township, back then US 24 wasn't a bypass.
Hmm.
US 24 was a main route running from Toledo to Indiana, and it ran right through Waterville Township, right
Yeah.
through this now city of Waterville. And so there was a lot of traffic stuff that went on then. Not so much now because they built the bypass, but yes, quiet, but busy with traffic and accidents and fatalities and things like that. It was busy. The difference between the sheriff's office is size. That agency that I left, there was 5 full-timers and 5 part-timers. The Lucas County Sheriff's Office has between 400 and 500 employees, or between
Yeah.
500 and 600 employees actually. So that's the biggest, most recognizable difference.
Now, what are your duties when you first moved into the sheriff's department? What were your duties and how did that change over the years?
I began, actually, I came in because one of the things that I realized early in my career that I enjoy doing a lot is working with the education side of law enforcement, informing young people about the dangers of drugs and violence. And that's
Mhm.
how I initially came in with the sheriff's office, as somebody who did that. When I first got to the sheriff's office, we were doing drug prevention programs at about a dozen schools in Lucas County. I was allowed to expand that. At one point in time, we had nearly 24 schools. Right now, I think we're at 21, 20, somewhere around there. But we do all of Springfield schools. We do all of Washington local schools. We do a couple Toledo public schools, as well as some parochial schools. So that was the main focus of what I did, was youth programs, your safety town
Yeah.
programs, talking to different youth organizations about safety, things like that. That was the focus.
There's a couple different sides to that argument too. So I'm curious, when you left that part of it, did you feel like that had left an impression with the kids that you had made a difference? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, those programs in school, they don't work. Those kids don't remember that kind of stuff." Did you find that maybe you ran into those kids later in life and they said, "Boy, I'll tell you what, I remember that class you taught us in sixth grade."
Actually, um, if you run the numbers, I've had, you know, thousands upon thousands of kids in class, and I run into them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Running a countywide campaign as I have, I've run into a lot of them that I didn't plan on running to, that who reached out to me to talk to me about those things, and that's been refreshing. A lot of times, people say, "Well, those programs are they don't work,"
Yeah.
and I'm the person who we could base this entire next hour simply on me telling you why those programs do work. They work because it's important that we give young people all the information that they need to be successful in life. We have to
Mhm.
provide that information. We can't go out and make those decisions for them, but we certainly want to make sure that we give them the information that they need. People often cite different studies that they've read about how these programs don't work, which I'm
Yeah.
always challenging, because it is impossible to do a study that says that a certain amount of young people did not get involved with drugs or violence because of the program. Because of the program,
Right.
we can
It's
never
hard to prove that.
we
Yeah.
can't do that study. We can do studies all day long that say a certain amount of people did it, even though they had the training, even though they had the program, but we can't do it the other way. So it's impossible. So I always ask people, just because a seatbelt's never saved your life, do you not want to, do you want to ignore that seatbelt and not wear it? I
Mhm.
mean, we could, like I said, we could argue about this for a long time, but the one thing that I like to point out to people is that when you see these studies will often twist statistics, because everybody can twist statistics. And I think one
Yeah.
of the most important ones that I see twisted all the time is these programs don't work because since these programs started back in the 80s, there's more people using drugs than ever before. And that statistic is absolutely true. The unfortunate part that they leave out, the important part of the equation that they leave out, is what has happened to our population. And if you put
Yeah.
that into that statistic, it's going to look a lot different. The important statistic is how many young people are not starting, and that statistic is doing quite well. There's a fewer young people starting than ever before. So
Yeah.
again, we
And that
could
goes, I think, for smoking and everything. I mean, just
absolutely.
regular cigarettes and stuff like that. Um, so when you were done with the youth program, now were you involved with the DART program at the sheriff's department also, or not?
No, the DART program is focusing on the side of, I'm on the prevention side. They're focusing on the treatment side. They're focusing
Okay.
on the side. And I've been fortunate enough to know many of the people that are in the DART unit. I've been fortunate enough to see what Sheriff Tharp has done since the conception of that program.
Yeah.
And so I know an awful lot about that program, where it's headed, what it's doing. But I haven't actively been a part of the DART unit. I've been focusing on the prevention side.
Now that's one of the topics that always comes up when we talk about the sheriff's department. People want to know if you're going to keep the DART program. It sounds like, based on what you already know about reaching out to the to young kids and teaching them what their options are, that the DART program is something that you would either keep and or expand then.
I would like to see the DART program um, do some more prevention, get
Mm.
involved in the prevention side. I'd like to see them expand. in that direction to provide more prevention, more education. But I think the program has proven its effectiveness. I think that the program is helping us with a lot of different things. There are people who should not be incarcerated. There are people who should not be in our jail because they need treatment before
Yeah.
we can go. And it's helping identify that. It's helping connect people with resources that they need. Sometimes, I'm a firm believer that prevention is something we have to do. We have to give people the information they need to succeed. But on the other side, on the flip side of the coin, we have to give people the tools that they need to be successful, even if they weren't successful initially. Not,
Yeah.
everybody.
And there's always going to be people that fall through the cracks, and well, guys like Matt Bell, for instance, great student and everything. St. Francis got into drugs, and if it wasn't for the DART program, he wouldn't be where he is today, actually running a rehab facility. So we know those things work. That's for sure.
Everybody makes mistakes, and we have to provide everybody the opportunities to fix those.
Yeah. Now you mentioned there's some people that don't belong in jail, and jail is pretty much the number one topic when we talk about the sheriff. Where should the jail be? Should we build a new jail? Do we just need to rehab the current jail? I'm sure as part of the sheriff's department, you've heard a lot of this chatter. Where do you stand on all of that?
Well, the do we need a new jail? I certainly hope that has been I hope that's over. I think we've proven that the jail itself, the building itself, I believe it was outdated the day that they opened the doors, and the facility, unfortunately, is in really bad shape. And early on, before we had some studies done, people would argue that it is a jail. It doesn't need to be a Taj Mahal. To which my answer to them is that you have to remember that there are hundreds of corrections officers and deputy sheriffs who are in that building on a daily basis for 12 hours, 16 hours at a time. 40, 50 hours a week. What did they do to deserve that type of a situation or environment? So it's more than just making sure that it's safe for those inmates. Inmates have rights. They have rights to be in a safe and healthy environment. And those people who are there to keep everything safe, they have the right to have us in the building. The building, I don't believe that building can be saved. So I hope that discussion is over. I believe that it is. I believe that most people understand. And I'm I love historic buildings, and I don't like it when people tear down old buildings. This building is not a case of that. I don't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's nothing historic about it. So let's assume that we tear the building down. Is that where you would put a new jail, or do you have other thoughts on where a jail should be?
I think that the new jail. I believe the new jail needs to be downtown. There are other things downtown that it's imperative that jail be by. Bus station, number one. A lot of people walk out of there and they don't have transportation. They're heading to the bus station. The courthouse is downtown. There are treatment facilities that people may be heading to when they leave there that are downtown. Attorneys are downtown. Probation is downtown. I could sit here and go on and on and on about all the things that are in close proximity of that jail and the reasons why it needs to be there. So yes, it needs to be downtown.
Now, obviously, that's going to take some money, and the big topic of discussion, not so much with the sheriff's office, because I don't think it's gotten there yet, but with local police, especially in the municipalities, is the move to defund through city budgets, or now they're saying refund city budgets into other social service agencies that they would hope would be preventive. And keep cops from having to deal with situations that maybe they're not ready for. Do you ever see that coming to the sheriff's department, and where do you stand on the whole defunding / refunding of law enforcement?
Well, defunding is, I think, pretty much what you just said, Fred. They want to take funding from law enforcement and they want to put it in other social services so that those people can do many of the jobs that law enforcement officers are doing. I think back to the police academy, and one of the first real thoughts that went through my head is when being educated is when someone stood and said, look, you're not just a law enforcement officer, you're a counselor. You are a rolling, moving resource center that
Yeah.
is going to refer people. You're a referral center. You are they just went down this long list of all these things that you are as a law enforcement officer. You're not just somebody out there who's there specifically to enforce the law. You're there to do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And that's the training. That's how the training has evolved. And the thought or the concept that you're going to send a social worker to go take care of specific situations, to me, is dangerous. It's dangerous. It's dangerous both to the people who are being sent to do that work, and it's dangerous to the citizens who are expecting somebody to come and take care of things. I mean, we are going on the assumption that there's somebody who has a mental illness problem, and so we're going to send somebody who's specifically trained for that, but not trained for law enforcement. If we believe that somebody who is having mental illness challenges is not going to cause physical harm to somebody, we're living in a fantasy world. That's why law enforcement officers are trained. We have law enforcement officers, a lot of them are currently going through crisis intervention training. Crisis intervention training is specifically designed to send we actually, side note, peace officers are what we refer to in the state of Ohio.
Right.
We're not police officers, referred to as peace officers. So when a peace officer is sent to a situation like that, they're being trained to identify different types of situations and mental illnesses and how to handle those situations. We're the ones that are supposed to go on scene to keep people safe. We can't send people who are not trained in how to protect themselves and how to protect the other citizens that are involved in it. We can't send those people there. We are the referral service. We're the person who's supposed to get them there. The idea that we're going to take money from law enforcement and give it to other agencies who are going to do that job, to me, is a very risky discussion. Discussion, and I'm strongly against it, because not only do we not need to defund the police agencies and the law enforcement agencies in our country, they need more funding, because what we need to do is make sure that those officers are better trained, right? And better is a bad choice of words, actually. We need to make sure that they're given all the update training that they need. Things change on a regular basis in our community. Yeah. Community partnerships are important because it allows us to work together to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all doing the same work and we're using the same procedures. And when we take away money, we're making it more difficult for us to make sure that our officers are trained and update training. Think about it. If tomorrow a cure for some big disease comes out, you want that cure to be provided to your doctor, to your health provider as soon as possible. Same thing in law enforcement. If tomorrow a new way to handle a situation that comes up, you want your law enforcement officers to receive that information as quickly as possible. Training is the number one problem in law enforcement. It's the number one thing that people are getting upset about. They don't realize that it's training. But because what they don't realize is every time we train somebody, the sheriff's office has 500 to 600 people in it. Every time we train somebody, it costs us 3 times to train that person. The person who goes to training is getting paid. And then the person who had the backfill for that person is also getting paid. And the person who's doing the training is getting paid. Training is expensive, but it is the most needed thing in law enforcement today. To talk about taking funding away instead of adding more funding to make those services better, to make our officers more informed, to make our citizens safer, that's what we need. So defund the police, I hope that is the answer you were looking for.
And you tied it in with the training, which is one of the other topics, because a lot of people believe that the cops just aren't ready in some situations to deal with things. And so training would be key. Is there a particular training that you've gone through over the years that you would recommend? Or is there a timetable, for instance, that you would give to sheriff's deputies that, look, every 6 months, because like for gun, you've got to train on your gun, you've got to qualify for that. Is there a particular thing that you would do for the training every 6 months, every year, something like that?
So Fred, I was military for 23 years. I was active duty Air Force. I was Air National Guard. I was Air Force Reserves. And probably one of the things that I was most involved in, I was Air Force Security Forces, but probably time and time again, I ended up involved in training programs.
Okay.
And in the military, I realized the importance of training programs and the importance of ongoing training. Because I mentioned earlier the cost of training somebody, we have to make sure that our officers are given the ability to receive update training, but we have to be inventive in the ways that we do it. We have to be thinking outside the box. And one of the big plans that I have is to truly incorporate technology into our training to allow officers the opportunity to train on a regular basis. To say that you have to stop doing what you're doing and go to our training section and you need to make sure that you're being updated on this, we have to change that. We have to change that mindset. There are a lot of ways that we can train cost effectively. And I would also then like to figure out, I have a lot of ideas when it comes to the budget, because I want to see officers receive quarterly training. I don't want to see them go to the range and fire their firearm once a year and take a test and go back to work. I want to see quarterly training, but that quarterly training is hands-on physical training where we're going to the training room, going to the training center. But prior to that happening, I want to see that technology has already set them up. Look, these are the things that you're going to be going over in your next training class. We need you to go over these videos. We need you to go over these trainings. There's these pre-tests that you're going to take before you get there. We have to change our mindset of how we're actually training. And I think we see that nationwide. We see a lot of law enforcement agencies changing the way that they're doing training because they want to get that information out as quickly as possible. Nurses, doctors, all these healthcare providers, they have a certain amount of time that they have to spend on a regular basis making sure they're updating. Why would law enforcement be any different?
Yeah. Okay. And you're dealing with the public on a daily basis. So when we get to that point, so we've got really good, well-trained officers out in the field. They're dealing with people on a regular basis who maybe are not at their best. And so that affects the officer's mental health. What are your thoughts on the officer's mental health and how we can better make sure that they're okay on a regular basis also?
There's two really important things that I think that we need to consider. And the first one is that we always need to make sure that we have services available to not just the officers, but to officers and their families when they're dealing with stressful situations. Law enforcement, unfortunately, law enforcement officers are just as susceptible to drug abuse, just as susceptible to suicide, in some cases even more than other career fields. So we have to make sure that those services exist. We do have services that exist currently. But I think the most important thing is that we have to change the way that we are identifying those people. We are assuming that somebody who is having problems is going to come forward and say, look, I'm having a lot of stress in my life because of this, because of that situation, and I really need to talk to someone about it. And it shouldn't, that's not the way that we can't rely on that, because most people have pride. Most people don't want to admit that they need to talk to somebody, that they need help. So
yeah, there's still a stigma. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think the important thing to do is to make this something that we are trying to make sure our supervisors are out there trying to identify those who maybe have to go talk to somebody, not as a punishment. In fact, that's the last thing that we should see this as. That we should see this as a way of strengthening our law enforcement officers' ability to do their job. And by identifying somebody who maybe needs to go talk to somebody, work through some things, we're only making them a better officer. Hey, look, nobody wants to be in law enforcement today. Our numbers are so far down. Every agency is hurting for people. The last thing that we should be doing is pushing people out the door. We should be doing everything we can to retain those who are there. And I think this is an important part of it. And another thing, something that goes along with that, I don't know how many people realize this, but I'm 53 years old. I went to the police academy in my early 20s. When I was offered my first position as a law enforcement officer, I went and I had a psychological evaluation.
Right.
So that was 28 years ago. How many psychological evaluations do you think I've had in those 28 years, Fred?
I would guess, just in speaking with other candidates and other law enforcement, none.
None.
Yeah. Unless something happens, it doesn't seem as though the higher echelon takes notice. If you fire your gun and you shoot somebody, yeah, then you go see the psych. But otherwise, that's why I asked. There doesn't seem to be the help there.
Yeah.
I don't want to say forced help, but it's not put out in front of you as something you should do.
No, and it needs to be put out there as something that people need to be more comfortable doing. And there needs to be a checks and balance. There needs to be a checks and balance in that system to make sure that people are getting I would love nothing better, but than to have to go see somebody and them to give me a piece of paper that I can show people. Say, hey, they said I'm perfectly fine. Look,
I'm
I'm
okay.
good. I'm
They
good.
looked in my head and they didn't find anything.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that sounds pretty good. So you mentioned that the number in the ranks are falling. What would you do to attract? Because we need to attract younger people into both municipalities, law enforcement, and into the sheriff's department. What do you do to attract younger people and maybe people of color who already have a fear or a suspicion of being in law enforcement?
Well, Sheriff Tharp worked with me closely on one of the first things that we can do, and about 7 or 8 years ago, we started an Explorer program that I've been very fortunate to lead and bring this into our agency. And the Explorer post is specifically designed to find young people between the ages of 14 and 21 who feel they may be interested in law enforcement. And we bring them in, we have meetings, we do trainings. It is backed by the Boy Scouts of America. The Lucas County Sheriff's Office is the ones presenting the program, but it's backed by they're actually all belong to the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
And that's a start that helps identify people, young people in our community who might be interested. And that's been a positive thing in two ways. We've had young people who now work for us. There's a Toledo police officer who began in our program when it
Okay.
first started 7 years ago. There is a Maumee police officer, I think a Sylvania police officer. Uh, I can't think of. Oh, there's a police officer in the Georgia State Patrol, I believe. I mean, they've gone out into law enforcement, and one of the things that we try to do is we try to show them all of law enforcement, not just one aspect of law enforcement. We bring in, park rangers. We bring in, BCI agents. We're bringing them in from all different directions. So getting that education, I keep going back to education, but getting that education to young people that there are so many different ways that they can go in law enforcement, getting a lot of them understanding the corrections is one of the largest part of law enforcement. Doing that is really important. It's also been interesting. I'll point this out. There's been times where young people have come in and after a little while they come and say, this probably isn't for me. I think I'm going to be an architect, which I think is great. How much money did we just save that young person on going through a criminal justice degree that would be very limited in what they could use it for.
Mm-hmm.
So the other part of this is recruitment. I believe that just like our armed forces, we need to be out there recruiting people. We need to make it something that we are doing on a regular basis. We have to have people who are dedicated to recruitment. All large agencies are doing this now. And I think it's something that we are starting to do. Sheriff Tharp has done so many wonderful things, and I can't praise him enough. But I think that we need to really focus on recruitment and make sure that we have people understand that this is a great career opportunity. There are a lot of really good things that go along with this job.
What do you see the job as being? When I talked to Chief Navarre last week, he explained that, in a municipality like Toledo, Oregon, Perrysburg, Sylvania, they have their own police forces. They're dealing with the type of crime that you would see in a place like that, but that the sheriff's department is more jail oriented because they run the jail. How do you see the sheriff's department, and what do you see as your duties going forward?
I'm not 100% sure I would agree with that. The sheriff's office is very unique in that yes, corrections is the primary duty of the sheriff and the sheriff's office. But the sheriff's office has so many different divisions. We have a detective bureau. We have the civil branch. We have all the officers who are working in the courts there. We have transportation unit. We have, I could just go on and on. We have a law enforcement. We have a lot of different divisions in the sheriff's office. The job of the sheriff is to bring all that together. If you look at what the Ohio Revised Code says is the duties of the sheriff, the sheriff's primary job is to maintain a jail and to respond to emergencies and respond to calls for emergencies. So to do that, you have to be able to handle all those different divisions of the sheriff's office. Corrections is very, very important. Probably it is our largest, but there's a lot of other things. And as far as the neighboring communities, all those people who are in positions of authority and all those outlining agencies, I came up with over the years. I have very close working relationships with all of them. And I think that that's the key to success. We have to have close working relationships with all those agencies. And I believe I have the ability to do that. We have to work together. And I think I've proven over the years to those small agencies that I am the person who can work together.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things I wanted to ask is about your collaborative efforts uh, with other agencies. Because one of the things that happens is, especially if there's a big emergency, anything that would have to do with COVID or a train derailment or anything like that, you're going to be calling in other sheriff's departments, maybe the FBI, certainly the municipal police from whatever city it happens in. And you kind of touched on that already, and that you've worked with a lot of them. How do you see your strength or weakness in collaborative efforts and cooperation?
I've been in so many situations with these other agencies already. I think the strength is that we understand that we're all there for the same purpose.
Hmm.
When you show up to work together, you're there just to do that, work together. I've had so many different opportunities over the years to work with the other agencies, and I know that they're professional agencies. I know they're ran professionally, and the strength is knowing that we're both there to do the same job.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So you get a lot of people who ask, why don't we see the sheriff, patrolling the city of Toledo? Well, the city of Toledo has its own police department. The sheriff's office is focusing on responding to those calls for emergency services, and those calls are going to come from places that can't answer those calls.
Right.
Your outlying townships and things of that matter, and that's where we're focused. Although a lot of people don't realize that there are process servers all over the city of Toledo every single day. There are transportation units all over the city of Toledo. I mean, we are there. We're just not actively patrolling or responding to calls. Does that mean that we're not there to help or assist? Absolutely not. That's
Yeah.
part of that collaboration. That's what we do. And when we talk about collaboration, Fred, I think it's important to know that the sheriff has to really be active in local boards, and I've been fortunate enough to sit on many different boards over the years, and that's really truly part of the community partnerships and the collaboration that we have to have with all those different boards and agencies that are out there.
Yeah. Excellent. The other thing I wanted to touch base on with you. Now, I talked with Chief Navarre already. You're on the ballot as a Republican. Earl is running as an independent. I asked Chief Navarre about being a Democrat, whether or not that was important when it came to the race. As a Republican, is there endorsement involved in that? And how important is that to what you're trying to do?
Uh, I am a Republican, and I guess there's a certain amount of honesty that is expected here, and because I'm a Republican and I have a lot of conservative beliefs, for me to run any other way, I don't think would have been honest.
Right.
And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. When it comes to the sheriff's role, to look at what party somebody is running for, I sometimes feel that that's unfair. I'm currently a township trustee where I live, and that is a nonpartisan position.
Mm-hmm.
And when you run based on the job, and you run based on what you're going to do in that position. And I truly believe that when people go look at who they're going to be voting for sheriff, I think it's important that they look at who is the most qualified person for the job. Who is the person that's going to make sure that they keep our community safe? Who's the person who's going to be looking out and making sure that the people who are supposed to be inside that corrections facility stay inside, and they stay in there healthy, and they stay in there safely? Who's the person who's going to do that job? Not the letter behind the name. I think when, the sheriff is not making decisions that are going to affect, major laws in our country. They're enforcing the law. They're not changing laws. And I think it's important that people maybe look at their values and what letters behind somebody's name when they are voting for somebody who's going to be representing them in the House of Representatives. That's really important.
Yeah.
But your sheriff is a law enforcement officer. And that's what they should be looking at. And surely there's a part of me who believes that the sheriff's office should be a nonpartisan position, but it's not. And so you have to
You have
choose
to
what you're
work
going to
within
do.
the system.
And I'm going to be honest, and
Yeah.
so that you'll see an R behind my name when you go to the voting booth.
You got to work with in the system the way it's set up. One other thing, and then I'll let you give us your elevator pitch as to why we should vote for you. And the second thing that comes up a lot is always the jail, and mainly because people, I think, are afraid. Your Second Amendment stand always comes up. Is the sheriff going to honor the Second Amendment? What if the state legislature says this or does that? Is the sheriff going to make sure that I retain my rights? And I'm sure you've heard the arguments before. So
This sheriff absolutely positively will. There's no way around that. I am a full supporter of the Second Amendment. I have a series of videos that we put out there on our webpage and on our Facebook page, and one of the videos is specifically about the Second Amendment and CCW laws and things like that. And all my videos are 3 to 5 minute videos, and there's one that's specifically on that. It outlines how I feel and what my thoughts are. But I am a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment.
all right. What is your website, by the way?
WarnerForSheriff.com.
WarnerForSheriff.com. The number 4 or the word 4?
The word 4, yes.
All right. WarnerForSheriff.com. All right. So you know what an elevator pitch is, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Give us your elevator pitch. Why should people in Lucas County vote Brett Warner for Lucas County Sheriff?
I always start out with the fact that there are 500 to 600 employees working for the sheriff's office. I already know who some of the main, who all of the main players are with the sheriff's office. With that many people in an agency, it is important that we identify that most law enforcement agencies are what we call quasi-military organizations. My 23 years in the military and my 28 years in law enforcement, I think uniquely qualify me for the job. I think that that structure, that military structure, is very important in any agency being successful. That's really important to me. The other thing I like to point out to people is there are times when, and if you're a business owner, you know that there are times that it's important that you go outside your agency and find somebody to come in to lead that agency. There are times that it's necessary, and sometimes that person is within, and you promote from within. They're already there. They already know what needs to be done. You don't miss a beat. All right. Their first day is just another day of doing the things that need to be done and taken care of. And I think that I'm that person from within. I think that we don't have to go outside right now. I think that Sheriff John Tharp has done an outstanding job over the past nearly 8 years doing what he needs to do. And I think I'm that person who it's just another day at the sheriff's office, and we're going to move forward and take care of the things that need to be taken care of. Obviously, I have some things that I'd like to see done a little bit different than Sheriff Tharp. If we agreed on everything, I don't think that would be a good thing. So, but I'm that person from within, and I'm asking the voters of Lucas County to see that my unique background combined with law enforcement and military, and being inside the sheriff's office to be promoted from within would be helpful, not just to the sheriff's office, but to the community.
Excellent. Brett, thanks a lot for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
One of the things that I think is going to happen because of the way we had to do this is I think you're going to have to stop the recording, and I'm hoping that it's going to end up on my laptop. And if you stop and it goes to your laptop, we're going to have to figure out a way for me to get it from you, either as a file or we'll have to figure something out. So
my campaign chairman is here, and he is
excellent.
He's a tech genius, and
perfect.
He's looking at this. So